Most people don't live. They just postpone death. If you've ever woken up feeling like you're stuck in a life you didn't choose, if your days repeat like scenes from a movie you've seen 1,000 times, if there's something inside you screaming for change but you can't even get started, you're not alone. And no, it's not laziness, it's not a lack of discipline, it's not even a lack of willpower, it's something much deeper, much more dangerous. You are betraying who you could have been. And with each passing day, the debt you owe yourself only increases. Most people live as if they have infinite time, as if life were a dress rehearsal for something that will happen later. They postpone important conversations. They put off projects that matter. They put off the version of themselves they feel pulsing beneath their skin, that person they could be if they had the courage. And the cruelest thing is that this betrayal is silent. It doesn't scream. It doesn't explode. It just accumulates like dust on forgotten furniture, until one day you look in the mirror and no longer recognize who is on the other side. Thoreau called this lives of quiet desperation. But he wasn't talking about sadness. He was talking about something worse. The slow, terrible realization that you are living below your potential. That there is a version of you, braver, truer, more alive, that is starving to death while you pretend everything is fine. And here's the part no one wants to hear. This discomfort is not a defect, it's a resource. It's your soul's fire alarm trying to save you before it's too late. But there's one thing very few people understand about real transformation. It's not about motivation. It's not about willpower. It's about facing the most uncomfortable truth there is. You are dying without having lived, and there's still time to change that. The question is, will you? There's a weight that some people carry that no one else can see. It's not clinical depression, although it may seem like it. It's not diagnosable anxiety, although it's always present. It's something more subtle, more insidious. Something that wakes you up at 3 in the morning for no apparent reason and won't let you go back to sleep. It's the feeling of being behind in a race you never wanted to run, of having lost something essential along the way but not remembering exactly what, of waking up every day with a tiredness that sleep cannot cure, because it's not your body that's exhausted, it's your soul. You look around and everyone seems to be following an invisible script. Study, work, marry, buy, accumulate, repeat. And you try to follow too, because that's what responsible people do, right? That's how you grow up. That's how you mature. But underneath the social mask, underneath the automatic "I'm fine" you utter every time someone asks, there's a question that won't leave you alone. Is that all there is? Is this what it means to be an adult? To spend most of your life doing things that don't matter? To wait for the weekend like a prisoner waits for parole? To live for 2 days of false freedom that you spend recovering from the exhaustion of the other 5? Phillips Brooks described this feeling with painful accuracy. It is feeling the thing you ought to be beating beneath the thing you are. It's as if there were a second version of you, truer, more whole, more alive, living in a parallel dimension, watching as you settle for less, much less. And the worst part, you know it. You've always known. It's not as if anyone tricked you. It's not as if they forced you. You made choices. Small, everyday, seemingly harmless choices. You chose security over risk, comfort over growth, the known over the possible. And each of those choices seemed reasonable at the time. It seemed mature. It seemed like what you should do. Be realistic. Think about the future. You have responsibilities. You're not a child anymore. You can't just dream. And you listened. You swallowed each of those phrases as if they were words of wisdom. As if giving up your dreams was a sign of maturity. As if giving up on who you could be was the inevitable price of growing up. But the choices added up. And now here you are. 40 hours a week, sometimes more, in a chair that numbs you. Doing things that don't touch you. Solving problems that don't matter to you. Coming home too tired to do anything that's really worthwhile. Watching series after series so you don't have to face the silence. Because in the silence, the question comes back. It always comes back. When did I stop dreaming? Modern society is an expert at disguising this despair. It teaches you to call surrender maturity, to call conformity realism, to call fear responsibility. How can you drop everything when you have bills to pay? How can you take risks when people depend on you? How can you pursue a dream when you're past the age? These questions seem sensible, even noble. They make you seem responsible. But often they are just sophisticated excuses, well-constructed rationalizations to stay exactly where you are. Because change, real change, would require facing something terrible. The possibility that you have wasted years living the wrong life. And no one wants to face that. No one wants to look back and admit that the last 5, 10, 15 years were spent building a life you didn't want. That you traded time, the one resource you'll never get back, for security that never came and comfort that never satisfied. Kierkegaard understood this dynamic deeply. He called it a mortal illness, Not physical death, but existential death. The state of despair in which you fail to become who you really are. And for him, the greatest danger was not passionate error. It was not trying something big and failing. It was comfortable numbness. It was letting life pass you by without ever really choosing to live it. Life is not destroyed by dramatic wrong decisions. It is destroyed by the slow erosion of never really deciding to live, of never truly choosing, of always taking the safest, most predictable, most acceptable path until you realize you've arrived at a place you never wanted to be. The problem is that you know this. Deep down, where you can't fool yourself, you know you're not living the life you could be living. That knowledge settles in your chest like a stone, heavy, constant, impossible to ignore completely. You feel it when you see someone pursuing a passion with total abandon, when you encounter a work of art that reminds you of your suppressed impulses, when you catch your own gaze in the mirror and can't hold it for long, when your children ask you about your dreams and you realize you have no answer, because it's been so long since you stopped dreaming that you don't even remember what it's like, because the reflection doesn't lie, and it knows the truth you try to hide from everyone, even yourself. You are betraying your potential. You are choosing the lesser, safer, more acceptable version of who you could be. You are living a borrowed life, following a script that was never yours. And every day that passes in this betrayal is a day you will never get back. Nurses who work with people in the last days of their lives report something devastating. The most common regret is not having done something and failed. It is not having tried and failed. It is never having tried. It is reaching the end and realizing that you lived the life others expected of you, not the life you wanted to live. It is realizing that you spent decades being who you should be instead of discovering who you really were. And then comes the question that haunts those who live like this, the question that wakes you up at 3 in the morning, the question that pops up when you're alone, in traffic, in the shower, in those moments when you can't distract yourself. What if I had tried? What if you had had the courage? What if you had chosen growth instead of security? What if you had truly lived instead of just existing? What would your life be like now? Who would you be? What would you have created? What impact would you have made? These questions hurt. They hurt because you know the answer. You know you could be more, do more, live more, but you didn't. And every day that passes without change is another blank page in the book that could have been your life. But here's what no one tells you about this weight you carry. It's not there to destroy you. It's there to wake you up. Because there's a huge difference between living with this guilt without understanding what it means and finally realizing that it's the only thing that can still save you. The question is, why does this pain exist? Why do some people feel this existential discomfort while others seem perfectly satisfied with conventional lives? Why do you wake up at 3 in the morning with a tight chest while your coworker, doing exactly the same thing as you, sleeps peacefully? Why do you feel like you're rotting inside while others seem at peace with mediocrity? Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding this, and what he discovered changes absolutely everything. Jung realized that most psychological suffering, not all but most, doesn't come from isolated trauma or random chemical imbalances. While these exist and are absolutely real, most people who suffer psychologically suffer for a much simpler and much harder to admit reason. You are living inappropriately. You are betraying your essential nature. And the psyche, your soul, your essence, whatever you want to call it, is punishing you for it. He called this an inappropriate approach to life. And what that means in practical terms is devastating. You are not sick. You are lying. Lying about who you are, about what you want, about what really matters to you. And your body, your mind, your soul, everything in you is screaming, stop this. Get back to the truth before it's too late. Think about physical pain for a second. When you put your hand in the fire, the pain isn't the problem. It's the solution. It's your system warning you with maximum urgency. Get your hand out of there now, or you're going to really hurt yourself. Pain protects you. It saves you. Without it, you would burn yourself to the bone without realizing it. Without it, you would destroy yourself without even knowing you were in danger. Jung understood that emotional pain works in exactly the same way. When you live in a way that contradicts who you really are, when you betray your deepest values, when you stifle your genuine impulses, when you pretend to be someone you're not, the psyche generates discomfort, anxiety, depression, restlessness, nameless anger, sadness for no apparent reason, not by accident but as an alarm, as a protection system. It's your soul saying you're in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing, being the wrong person. And if you keep going like this, you'll lose yourself completely. Think about the anxiety that attacks you every Sunday night. That tightness in your chest when you remember that Monday is coming. That feeling of suffocation that starts in your stomach and rises to your throat. That dread you can't explain but that paralyzes you. Modern medicine wants to drug you. It wants to silence the alarm, give you something to sleep, something to calm you down, something to help you function better on Monday. But the alarm isn't the problem. The hot stove is the problem. And the hot stove in your case is a life you didn't really choose. A job that means nothing to you. Days that dissolve into nothingness while something essential in you rots away. An existence you're enduring instead of living. Your anxiety isn't a neurological flaw. It's a perfectly rational response to an irrational life. Your body is telling you the truth that your mind tries to ignore. You weren't made for this. The same goes for depression. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and later created logotherapy, meaning-based therapy, discovered something fundamental about human nature. The main motivation is not pleasure, as Freud thought. It is not power, as others thought. It is meaning. It is having a why. Frankl saw this in the concentration camps. People in the same horrible conditions, hunger, cold, violence, imminent death, reacted in completely different ways. Some collapsed in the first week, others survived for years. And the difference was not in the external conditions. These were equally brutal for everyone. The difference was not in physical strength. Many strong people died while weak ones survived. The difference was in one thing. Those who had a reason to live could endure almost anyhow. Those who had something waiting on the other side, a loved one, an unfinished project, an unfulfilled mission, found strength where there should be no strength. And he took that with him to life outside the camps. He realized that when you exist without purpose, without something that matters deeply to you, without a reason to wake up in the morning that goes beyond obligation, depression is not pathological. It is predictable. It is the natural response of a human being living in an inhuman way. You weren't made to spend decades doing something that doesn't touch you. You weren't made to live on autopilot, alternating between work that doesn't matter and distractions that don't satisfy. You weren't made to wake up, work, eat, Netflix, sleep, repeat until you die. No human being was made for that, and when you do that long enough, your body and mind go on strike. Jung saw this repeatedly in his patients. Functional, even successful people who suddenly collapsed for no apparent reason. Executives who had everything, money, status, family, respect, but woke up wanting to disappear. Respected professionals who could no longer get out of bed. People who should be happy, but felt an emptiness that nothing, absolutely nothing, could fill. And there was always a reason. Always. It was no mystery. It was no bad luck. They were living lives that weren't theirs, following paths they didn't choose, being people they didn't want to be, fulfilling expectations that were never theirs, building external empires while their inner kingdom crumbled. And here's the trick that changes everything. Jung realized that this pain can be healing, that it's not just destruction, it can be construction, that it can be the catalyst that finally forces you to confront how you're living, to wake up, to stop lying, to return to the truth. His colleague, Yolanda Jacobi, wrote something powerful about this. Neurotic suffering can compel a person to confront the foundations of their being and thus gain a better understanding of their limits and possibilities. In other words, pain is not just a problem, it is potentially a teacher. The toughest, most relentless, sometimes cruelest teacher you will ever have, but also the most honest. It doesn't spare you. It doesn't protect you from discomfort, but it forces you to face the truth you have been avoiding. And the question changes completely. From, how do I make this pain stop? To, what is this pain trying to tell me? Because think about it. You've been doing everything to eliminate the discomfort, but without touching the source. You seek therapy to deal with work anxiety, but you don't consider changing jobs. You take medication for depression, but you don't question whether your life has enough meaning. You meditate to calm your mind, but you don't ask why your mind is in constant turmoil. You use relaxation techniques to get through another day, but you don't question whether you should be putting up with it in the first place. You're trying to feel better inside the prison instead of considering that maybe, just maybe, you should get out of it. You're treating the symptom, ignoring the disease, silencing the alarm while the house burns down. And Jung was brutally clear about the danger of this. He said, "We may think there is a safe path, but that would be the path of death. Then nothing else happens. At least not the right things. Anyone who chooses the safe path is as good as dead." Read that again. Read it slowly. As good as dead. The safe path is the path of least resistance. It is choosing to avoid discomfort at any cost. It is deciding to numb rather than feel, distract rather than confront, medicate rather than change. It seems safe because it avoids risk. It seems smart because it avoids pain. But it is deadly because it avoids life. Because in the end you reach the end having not lived, only existed, only survived, only passed. And we live in a perfect time for that. A time of unprecedented comfort and unprecedented addiction. We have more ways to escape ourselves than any previous generation. Endless streaming so you never have to be alone with your thoughts. Endless social media so you never have to face the void. Substances, shopping, pornography, compulsive work, food, obsessive exercise, relationships that go nowhere but keep you busy. An endless menu of escapes. A 24-hour emotional pharmacy. And none of these escapes are inherently bad. That's not it. The problem arises when you use them not as occasional recreation, but as a primary strategy for dealing with life. When they cease to be rest and become escape. When you can no longer spend 5 minutes with yourself without seeking distraction. When you pick up your phone every time you feel bored. Because boredom forces you to ask what you really want to do with your life. When you drink every time you feel stressed. Because stress forces you to ask why you are living in such an unsustainable way. When you watch TV shows every time you feel empty. Because emptiness forces you to ask what would give meaning to your existence. When you work yourself to exhaustion every time you feel lonely. Because loneliness forces you to face who you have become. You are choosing the safe path. You are medicating symptoms instead of treating causes. You are silencing the alarm instead of putting out the fire. You are running away from the teacher who can save you. And deep down where you can't lie to yourself, where all defenses fall away, where the raw truth stares back at you, you know it. You've always known it. And now comes the part that most people don't understand. The part that when you finally understand it, changes your entire relationship with suffering. Because the pain you feel is not random. It is not punishment. It is not a sign that you are weak or broken. It is a map, a compass pointing exactly where you need to go. But you need to learn to read that map. You need to stop trying to extinguish the signal and start understanding what it means. Jung's colleague Yolanda Jacobi went even further. She said that neurotic suffering can become a healing factor, a stimulus in personality development. In other words, the very thing you think is destroying you may be exactly what forces you to finally grow, to transform, to become who you really are. Think about that moment when the pain becomes unbearable enough, when you can't take another day, when you wake up and think, I can't go on like this. That's when most people finally take action. Not before, not when it's uncomfortable, but when it's unbearable. The pain forces you to a crossroads. You can keep running away, and the pain will only increase. Or you can finally face what it's trying to show you, that you're on the wrong path, that you're being the wrong person, that you're living the wrong life. And here's what's both liberating and terrifying. You've always known this. Always. The pain isn't revealing anything new to you. It's forcing you to admit what you already knew, but refused to face. Viktor Frankl discovered something brutal about this in the concentration camps. He realized that it wasn't suffering itself that destroyed people. It was meaningless suffering. When pain had no purpose, when it was just random and without reason, people broke down. But when that same pain had a why, when it served a greater purpose, it became bearable, even transformative. He wrote, "In a way, suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning." Read that again. Suffering ceases to be suffering when it finds meaning. So the question isn't, how do I make this pain stop? The question is, what is this pain showing me? Where is it pointing? What change is it demanding of me? Your anxiety is saying, you're in the wrong place. Your depression is saying, your life isn't meaningful enough. Your anger is saying, you're betraying your values. Your restlessness is saying, you were made for more than this. And when you stop fighting these signals and start listening to them, when you stop trying to silence the messenger and start paying attention to the message, everything changes. Pain transforms from enemy to ally, from torture to guidance, from problem to solution. But there's one thing you need to understand. Listening to pain doesn't mean obeying every impulse. It doesn't mean dropping everything tomorrow. It doesn't mean acting impulsively or destructively. It means something much more subtle and much more difficult. It means having the courage to admit the truth, to stop lying to yourself about what you really want, about who you really are. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. Epictetus taught that we should focus only on what is within our control, and the only thing truly within our control is our response to circumstances. You can't control whether you feel pain, but you can completely control what you do with it. You can use pain as an excuse to stay stuck. You can use it as fuel for change. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it rebuild you. The choice, the only choice that really matters, is yours. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote something powerful in the midst of his battles and responsibilities. The obstacle becomes the way. What he meant is devastatingly simple. The thing you are trying to avoid is exactly what you need to face. The difficulty is not in your way. It is the way. The pain you feel is not preventing your transformation. It is your transformation trying to happen. It is the alarm clock saying, wake up, change, grow, before it's too late. But what if you ignore it? What if you continue to choose the safe path, the comfortable escapes, the convenient lies? What if you continue to medicate symptoms instead of curing causes? Then something happens that Jung and Jacobi saw repeatedly. The pain turns into something much worse, into guilt. Not the guilt of having done something wrong, but the guilt of not doing anything right. The guilt of wasting your life while watching. The guilt of knowing you could change but choose not to. Jacobi was brutal about it. In fact, he should be considered guilty. His guilt lies not in the fact that he has a neurosis, but in the fact that knowing he has one, he does nothing to cure it. You are not guilty for feeling pain, but you are guilty for feeling it and doing nothing about it. For recognizing that your life is wrong and choosing to leave it wrong. For knowing you are dying without having lived and continuing to choose that day after day, year after year. And that guilt, ontological guilt, the guilt of existing below your potential, is far more destructive than any anxiety or depression, because there is no remedy, there is no therapy, there is no relaxation technique that will solve it. The only cure is action. It is real change. It is stopping lying and starting to live. Abraham Maslow studied the healthiest, most fulfilled people he could find. And do you know what he discovered? These people, whom he called self-actualized, were not immune to pain. They had not eliminated fear, anxiety, frustration, sadness. They felt all of these things. The difference was that they did not let these feelings prevent meaningful action. They had learned something fundamental. You don't have to feel brave to act courageously. You don't have to feel confident to make important decisions. You don't have to feel motivated to do what needs to be done. You act despite fear, with fear, through fear. And do you know what happens when you do that? When you act despite the pain instead of waiting for it to pass? The pain changes in nature. It's still there. You don't eliminate fear or doubt, but it loses its power over you because you've proven to yourself that you can act even when you don't feel ready. You can change even when you're scared. You can grow even when you're uncomfortable. The Japanese have a therapeutic approach called Morita that understands this perfectly. Instead of trying to change your feelings, Morita therapy teaches you to accept your feelings while redirecting your attention to constructive behavior. The motto is simple and revolutionary. Let feelings take care of themselves. What does that mean in practice? It means you stop waiting to feel good to act good. You stop waiting to feel brave to do brave things. You stop waiting for the perfect moment that will never come. You act now, with fear, with doubt, with discomfort, but you act. And you know what happens? When you get good at doing what needs to be done in your life, when you act consistently in alignment with your values, regardless of how you feel, feelings stop giving you so much trouble. Not because they disappear, but because they stop controlling you. Pain becomes fuel instead of an obstacle. Fear becomes information instead of paralysis. Doubt becomes healthy caution instead of an excuse not to try. But there's a truth that no one wants to hear. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's not an interesting theory to discuss. It's literally about your life, about how many days you have and how you're choosing to spend them. And time is passing, right now, as you read this, as you ponder, as you aren't ready yet. Because here's the truth that changes everything when you really internalize it. You're going to die. I'm going to die. We're all dying one day at a time, and you don't know when. It could be 50 years from now. It could be tomorrow. It could be tonight on your way home. And this is not an attempt to scare you. It is the most basic truth of human existence, the only absolute certainty you have. One day, maybe soon, maybe a long time from now, but inevitably, you will cease to exist. Everything you are, everything you could be, everything you haven't done yet, it will end. The Stoics understood that this awareness is not morbidity. It is clarity. It is the most powerful tool you have for deciding how to live. They practice something called memento mori, remember death, not as a macabre obsession, but as a daily reminder. Your time is finite. Every moment that passes is one moment less. Every day wasted is a day you will never get back. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and had every reason to think he was invincible, wrote to himself, "You may leave life now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." Think about how radical that is. Let the fact that you could die at any moment determine how you live, not in the sense of panic or despair, but in the sense of healthy urgency, of clear priorities, of knowing how to distinguish what really matters from what is just noise. Seneca developed this theme in his book, On the Shortness of Life. He argued that life is not short. Life is long enough if used well. The problem is that most people waste it. They spend decades in occupations they despise, on relationships that don't nourish them, on distractions that don't satisfy them. And suddenly they are old looking back, wondering where all that time went. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And the cruelest thing is that this waste is silent, invisible. You don't notice it day by day. A bad day doesn't seem like a big deal. A lost week is just a week. A year in the wrong job is just a year. But those days, weeks, years add up. And suddenly you're 40, 50, 60 years old and you realize you've spent most of your life doing things that didn't matter. Being someone you didn't want to be. Living a life you didn't choose. And you can't go back. You can't get those years back. That time is dead, burned, spent on things that weren't worth your most precious resource. The finite days you had. Steve Jobs faced death when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And do you know what he said about how it changed his life? He said that remembering he was going to die soon was the most important tool he ever had for making big choices in life. Because almost everything, external expectations, pride, fear of embarrassment, fear of failure, all these things just fall away when you face death. What remains is only what really matters. Remembering that you are going to die, he said, is the best way he knew to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You're already naked, he said. There's no reason not to follow your heart. Let that sink in. You're already naked. You have nothing to lose that death won't take from you anyway. Your reputation, it will die with you. Your comfort, temporary. Your security, illusory. The only thing you really have is now, this moment, this choice, this opportunity to truly live instead of just exist. And when you truly internalize this, not intellectually but viscerally, everything changes. The excuses that seem valid reveal themselves as cowardice. The fears that seemed rational show themselves to be wounded ego. The reasons not to try show themselves to be reasons not to live. How can I leave everything behind when I have bills to pay? You'll have bills to pay until you die. And then it won't matter if you paid them. It will matter if you lived. How can I take a risk when I have a family? What legacy do you want to leave? A father who lived in fear or a father who showed courage? Someone who settled for less or someone who pursued more? What if I try and fail? What if you don't try and end up with a list of what ifs haunting you? What if I had tried? What if I had been brave? What if I had lived? Awareness of death destroys procrastination. When you truly accept that you don't have infinite time, that there is no one day, that this could be your last year, your last month, your last week, you stop putting things off. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop waiting to be ready. Because there may not be an after. There may not be a better moment. This moment, now, may be all you have. But there's a dark side to this too. If you accept that you're dying but don't change anything, if you recognize that time is running out but continue to waste it, then the awareness of death does not liberate. It tortures. Jung and Jacobi saw this. They saw people who knew they were wasting their lives but did nothing about it. And these people developed a peculiar guilt, a constant, indefinable anxiety, a discomfort that no therapy could alleviate because the source was not past trauma. It was betrayal of the present. It was the crime of consciously choosing not to live. Jacobi described the torment. They are usually accompanied by vague feelings of guilt, by torments of conscience that are often not understood, before which the individual is powerless. He knows he is not guilty of any wrongdoing. He has not given in to any illicit impulse. And yet he is tormented by uncertainty, discontent, despair, and above all, anxiety. A constant and indefinable anxiety. It is the anxiety of someone who knows they are dying without having lived. Of someone who recognizes the betrayal but continues to commit it. Of someone who sees time passing but does nothing different. And that is perhaps the worst form of suffering. Not the pain of trying and failing, but the pain of not trying while watching your life slip through your fingers. But the opposite is also true. If the awareness of death moves you to action, if the recognition that time is short forces you to stop wasting it, then death becomes the greatest teacher. It doesn't paralyze you. It liberates you. It forces you to distinguish the essential from the trivial, the important from the urgent, real life from mere existence. And the question that death forces you to ask is simple and devastating. When you are at the end looking back, will you feel at peace with how you spent your time? Will you feel that you lived, that you loved, that you created, that you tried, that you took risks, that you grew, that you became who you were capable of being? Or will you feel that you merely survived, that you passed through, that you existed without really living, that you played it safe and lost everything that mattered, that you reached the end intact, but empty? And the answer to that future question is being determined right now, today, at this moment, by the choice you make when you close this video, by the decision to continue as you are or finally change, by the courage to start or the cowardice to keep putting it off, because one day you will be at the end. And there, all the excuses will sound hollow, all the reasons not to try will seem pathetic, all the time you wasted will scream in silence, And you will have to face the hardest truth of all. You had a chance, you had time, you had the possibility, and you chose not to use it. Or, and this is what changes everything, you will look back and feel that you did the best you could, that you tried, that you lived, that you didn't let fear decide, that you didn't let comfort win, that you chose growth even when it hurt, that you chose truth even when it was easier to lie, that you chose to live even when it was safer to just exist. The choice is yours, and it's now. But here's the part that stops most people. Understanding all this doesn't change anything. You can have perfect clarity about your life, fully accept that time is short, agree that you need to change, and still change absolutely nothing. Because understanding isn't the problem. Getting started is the problem, and the beginning is the hardest part of any transformation. It's the moment when you have to leave the comfort of intention and enter the discomfort of action. It's when you stop planning and start doing. It's when excuses must die so you can live. Resistance to beginning takes 1,000 forms, and they all seem rational. They seem sensible. They seem like you're being careful, not cowardly. I need to prepare more. I need to study more. I need to plan better. I need to be more certain. And then you spend months, sometimes years, in perpetual preparation, learning and never doing, planning and never executing, preparing for a moment that never comes because you keep moving the ready line. But readiness is a mirage. It recedes as you approach it. There's always one more book to read, one more course to take, one more thing to learn before you start. And while you prepare, time passes, and you remain exactly where you were. Sometimes resistance appears as analysis paralysis. You need to consider all the options, weigh all the alternatives, compare all the possible paths. And that seems smart, it seems diligent, but it's sophisticated procrastination. Because most important choices in life involve too many variables to predict with certainty. You will never have complete information. You will never be absolutely sure. At some point, you have to act based on incomplete information. You have to jump even without seeing where you will land. And if you wait for certainty, you wait forever. Other times, resistance appears as the fantasy of someday. Someday when you have more time. Someday when you have more money. Someday when the kids grow up. Someday when things calm down. Someday when you feel ready. But someday is not a day of the week. It's an imaginary place where conditions finally align perfectly. And that place doesn't exist. Conditions rarely improve on their own. In fact, they usually get worse. You get older, more tired, more stuck, more committed, more complacent. And someday keeps getting further away. Ralph Waldo Emerson understood the cure for all this. Do the thing you fear and the death of fear is certain. It's not a metaphor, it's an observation. Fear persists when you avoid what scares you because avoidance confirms the threat. It confirms that it's really dangerous, really impossible, really something you can't do. But when you do the thing you fear, even badly, even trembling, even with every muscle screaming to stop, you discover something. You can. You did it. And fear, confronted with evidence that you survive what it promised would destroy you, begins to lose its power. The person who's afraid of public speaking and avoids it may spend decades with that fear growing. The person who's afraid of public speaking but does it anyway, even badly, even nervously, even embarrassingly, discovers that they don't die. And the next time is a little less terrifying. And the next a little less, until the fear is still there, but it no longer controls you. The problem is that understanding that you should start doesn't automatically make you start. The moment of beginning requires a particular kind of courage, not dramatic heroism, but a simple willingness to take a step, a single step, despite all the voices saying wait. And here's the secret that changes everything. That step can be ridiculously small. The person who wants to write a book doesn't have to start by writing the book. They can start by writing a sentence. The person who wants to get in shape doesn't have to start with an intense 2-hour workout. They can start with a 5-minute walk. The person who wants to change careers doesn't have to quit everything tomorrow. They can start by spending 30 minutes on Saturday researching possibilities. The size of the step matters much less than the fact of taking the step. Because the hardest part of any journey is the transition from standing still to moving. Once in motion, continuing requires less effort than starting required. It's Newton's first law applied to human life. Objects at rest tend to remain at rest. Objects in motion tend to remain in motion. A person who has been sedentary for years finds it almost impossible to start exercising. But what about a person who has been exercising consistently? Not exercising starts to feel strange. The difficult part has shifted, but starting does more than overcome inertia. Starting also generates information that thinking never generates. You can theorize endlessly about whether you will enjoy writing, but you will only know by writing. You can endlessly imagine whether you are capable of learning a skill, but you will only discover your ability by trying to learn. Starting turns speculation into data. It replaces imagination with experience. And you often find that your worst predictions were wrong, that it's not as difficult as you imagined, that you are more capable than you feared, that the monster that paralyzed you was a shadow, not substance. Cal Newport makes a crucial point about this. Don't follow your passion. That is perhaps the worst career advice there is, because it assumes that passion pre-exists and you just need to discover it. In reality, passion usually follows competence. You fall in love with things you get good at doing, because competence brings satisfaction. Satisfaction brings engagement. Engagement turns into passion. So you don't have to wait to feel passion to get started. You just start. You develop skill through practice. Competence brings pleasure. Pleasure grows into passion. The person who waits to feel passion before starting often waits forever. The person who starts and develops competence finds passion as a byproduct. And starting also has another powerful effect. It makes you worthy of help in ways that intention does not. The universe, or other humans, respond to action. The person who says they're going to write a book but never writes doesn't get help because there's nothing to help. The person who starts writing, who produces pages, even bad ones, who demonstrates commitment through action, that person often finds unexpected support appearing. It's partly practical. People can see what you're doing and offer relevant assistance. It's partly psychological. Starting builds confidence that attracts more starting. And it's partly mysterious. Something about committed action seems to generate synchronicities and happy accidents that planning alone never produces. But perhaps the most important effect of starting is this. Starting transforms you from passenger to driver. For as long as you're stuck, you've been a victim of circumstances, a prisoner of patterns, a spectator of your own life. Getting started changes that instantly. You are no longer simply reacting. You are acting. You are no longer being carried along by the current. You are paddling. You are no longer letting life happen to you. You are making your life happen. And there is no perfect time to get started. The perfect time is a fiction, a fantasy, an excuse. There is only this moment, now, with all its imperfections and limitations and uncertainties. This moment will never be perfect, but it is the only moment you have. So the question is not whether the conditions are ideal. The question is, will you act within the conditions that exist? Will you start imperfect, scared, unprepared? Or will you wait longer, knowing that waiting is choosing not to live? And if you close this video and do nothing different tomorrow, understanding all of this has served no purpose. It was just interesting entertainment. Information you store but don't use. And you remain exactly where you are, knowing what you need to do but not doing it. Understanding the urgency but not acting. Recognizing that you are dying without living but choosing to let it continue. The transformation you seek is on the other side of the beginning, but the beginning is on the other side of fear. And you have to go through fear to get to the beginning. There is no shortcut. There is no hack. There is no way to do this comfortably. You have to do the thing that scares you. Take the step that paralyzes you. Start before you feel ready. Because it's exactly that, starting uncomfortable, that transforms you into someone who can. But here's the truth that no one prepares you to face. Even after you start, even after you take the first steps, even after you prove to yourself that you can, you're going to want to give up. Not once. 1,000 times, because our culture has sold you a lie about transformation. It has made you believe that change is about that decisive moment, that click, that revelation, and that after that, everything flows. You finally made it, and now you just have to maintain it. But real transformation doesn't work like that. Real transformation is slow, uncomfortable, frustrating, full of plateaus where you work without seeing progress, full of relapses where you return to old patterns, full of days where you do everything right and still feel lost. And that's exactly where halfway through most people give up. Not at the beginning. The beginning has the energy of novelty. But in the middle, when the novelty wears off and all that's left is the work, day after day, week after week, month after month, without external validation, without dramatic results, just you and your commitment, being tested every day. James Clear has a quote that should be tattooed on the mind of anyone trying to change. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. What does that mean? It means that your grand intentions don't matter. Your inspiring goals don't matter. What matters are the systems, the daily habits, the repeated practices, the small actions you take consistently, not when you're motivated, but especially when you're not. The person who wants to write a book but only writes when they feel inspired will never finish. The person who writes 1,000 words every day at 6 in the morning, inspired or not, tired or not, motivated or not, that person finishes books, plural, because they don't depend on feeling. they depend on system. And here's what changes everything. When you understand this, transformation doesn't come from heroic effort. It comes from mundane consistency. It doesn't come from doing something incredible once. It comes from doing something simple 1,000 times. Think of someone who wants to get in shape. Training 5 hours a day doesn't transform anyone, but 30 minutes, 6 times a week for a year, that completely transforms. The problem is that 30 minutes, 6 times a week doesn't seem transformative. It seems small. It seems insufficient. It seems like you should be doing more. But the power isn't in the intensity of one day. It's in the sum of hundreds of days. It's what mathematicians call the compound effect. Small improvements accumulated over time result in extraordinary changes. 1% better every day means 37 times better in a year. Not by magic, by math. But there's a trap here that destroys most people. They try to change everything at once. They wake up one day and decide, I'm going to start meditating, exercising, eating well, writing, reading more, going to bed early, waking up early, learning a new skill, all at once. And it lasts a week, maybe 2, before everything falls apart. Because willpower is finite. You have a limited amount of it every day. And when you try to make too many changes simultaneously, you exhaust your willpower trying to maintain them all. And when it's exhausted, you revert to all your old patterns at once. The approach that works is exactly the opposite. Change one thing. Establish it as a solid habit, something so automatic that it no longer requires willpower to do. And only then add the next change. It's slower, less impressive, but sustainable. And sustainability beats intensity every day of the week. And when you adopt this long-term mindset, when you stop expecting quick results and accept that true transformation takes years, not weeks, something changes. You stop measuring success by end results and start measuring it by consistency. You were successful today because you kept your commitment, not because you reached the end goal. Because you did what you said you would do. And every time you keep a commitment to yourself, you are voting. Voting for the kind of person you want to become. Every writing session is a vote for I am a writer. Every workout is a vote for I am someone who takes care of themselves. The votes accumulate. Eventually the election is decided. You become the person you have repeatedly chosen to be. But Maslow made a crucial observation about self-actualized people, those who managed to become fully who they were capable of being. He said self-actualization does not mean transcendence of all human problems. Conflict, anxiety, frustration, sadness, hurt, and guilt can all be found in healthy human beings. Read that again. Fully realized people still feel anxiety, they still feel fear, they still feel doubt. The difference is not the absence of difficult emotions. It is action despite them. You were hoping that one day you would feel brave all the time, confident all the time, motivated all the time, but that will never happen. And the good news is, it doesn't have to. You don't have to feel brave to act bravely. You don't have to feel confident to do difficult things. You don't have to feel motivated to keep your commitments. You act, and then maybe you feel better, or maybe not, but you acted. And in the end, your life is defined by your actions, not your feelings. No one at your funeral will say, she felt so many things. They will say, she did so many things. Or more sadly, she could have done so much more. And that brings us to the final truth, the deepest integration you need to make. Accept yourself completely as you are right now and commit yourself completely to growth. These are not contradictions. They are polarities that you need to hold at the same time. Jung understood this better than anyone. He saw psychological health as the ability to integrate opposites, not to collapse into one extreme or the other, but to maintain a healthy tension between them. The psychologically mature person does not choose between accepting themselves and changing themselves. They do both, simultaneously. I accept myself completely as I am now, imperfect, scared, limited. And I commit myself completely to becoming more courageous, more capable, more true. There is no contradiction. There is integration. Acceptance gives you the firm ground from which growth becomes possible. Commitment to growth gives you direction and energy. Together they create what Jung would call individuation, the process of becoming who you really are. And that process never ends. You never arrive. There is no endpoint where you have become completely self-actualized and can now relax. Self-actualization is not a destination. It is a direction. It is not a state achieved. It is a process engaged in. It is something you are always doing, never something you have finished. And honestly, that's liberating, because it means you can stop waiting for the moment when you finally make it. You can stop postponing happiness until you reach the goal. You can start to value the journey instead of just the destination. You can find satisfaction in daily growth instead of just the final achievement. The purpose is not to get to a specific place. The purpose is to keep growing, to keep becoming, to keep living in alignment with who you really are. And doing that requires patience that our culture doesn't value. It requires long-term commitment that our culture doesn't teach. It requires acceptance that this is a lifetime's work, not a weekend's. But it is precisely this commitment to the long game, to the process rather than the event, to the system rather than the goal, that separates those who transform from those who only think about transforming. And now we come to the end, not the end of the journey, because that journey has no end as long as you are alive, but the end of this conversation. And the question that matters is not what you understood, it's what you're going to do, because you can close this video with total clarity. You can agree with everything that has been said. You can feel that energy of this time it will be different. And tomorrow you can wake up and do exactly what you've always done. And nothing, absolutely nothing now will change. Or you can do something different. You can choose a small commitment. So small that it seems ridiculous. So simple that your mind will say that's not enough. And you can keep that commitment. Not tomorrow. Not next Monday when things really start. Today. Now. Imperfect. Scared. But now. Because here's the ultimate truth you need to internalize. You're dying. Every second that passes is 1 second less. Every day wasted is a day you'll never get back. And one day, maybe a long time from now, maybe tomorrow, you'll be at the end. And there you'll look back. And you'll ask one of two questions. Either you'll ask, why did I waste so much time? Why was I so afraid? Why didn't I try when there was still time? Or you'll ask, could I have done more? But at least you tried. At least you lived. At least you didn't let fear decide. The difference between these two questions is the difference between dying having lived and dying having merely existed. And that difference is determined not by one decisive moment, but by 1,000 small choices. Choices you make every day. Choices like the one you'll make when this video ends. Thoreau said that most people live lives of quiet desperation, but he didn't say that to describe an inevitable condition. He said it to point to a choice. You can live like this and numb on autopilot, betraying your potential day after day. Or you can wake up. You can feel the pain that forces you to change. You can start even when you're scared. You can persist even when it's hard. You can become who you are capable of being. And when you do that, when you finally stop running and start living, as something changes. The guilt you carried begins to dissolve, not because you become perfect, but because you're no longer betraying yourself. You're trying, you're growing, you're living. And that invisible weight you carried for so long, it transforms. It ceases to be a stone and becomes fuel. It ceases to be a prison and becomes freedom, because now you know the pain was right. It was showing you the way all along, and you're finally walking it. Not perfectly, not without fear, not without doubt, but walking. And that simple act of putting one foot in front of the other toward who you really are, that's everything. It's enough. It's what it means to be alive. So here's your first step if you choose to take it. Identify one thing, one practice, one habit, a commitment. Something so small that you have no excuse not to do it. And do it tomorrow. And the next day. And the next day. Not until you reach some goal, but because that's who you're choosing to be. And every day that you keep that commitment, you're voting. You're saying, I am someone who keeps my word to myself. I am someone who chooses growth even when it's uncomfortable. I am someone who doesn't let fear decide my life. And with time, more time than you want, less drama than you imagine, you'll look back and not recognize who you were. Not because you've become someone different, but because you finally become who you always were. And that process of becoming isn't about getting somewhere. It's about being on the path. It's about no longer betraying who you could be. It's about living instead of just existing. The life you're looking for isn't in some distant future after you make it. It's here, now, in the commitment you make, in the action you take, in the choice to no longer let another day go by without truly living. You have one life, one chance, a finite number of days. And the most important question you can ask yourself is not how do I become happy or how do I become successful? It is, am I living in such a way that when I reach the end, I will feel that I have truly lived? If the answer is no, change. Not someday, not when conditions improve. Now, because now is all you have, and tomorrow may not come. So here's my final question for you. When you're at the end, looking back, what do you want to have been? What do you want to have done? What legacy do you want to leave? And most importantly, what are you going to do today to start building that? If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos, you reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit codes are ready for you. The link is in the video description. Remember, Success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the white rabbit. And tell me in the comments, if you could go back in time and give your 5-year-old self advice about transformation, what would it be? What truth would you have liked to have understood before? The life you save is your own.